monitor may not be on.
Did get turned on.
Hello? Okay, we're on, but the monitors are not, correct? Okay, we'll go ahead and get going. Thanks. Bye-bye. We're on.
Ladies and gentlemen, the meeting of the Wadsworth Planning Commission will please come to order. The first item on our agenda is public participation. Looking at the audience, I think everyone in the audience this afternoon or this evening is related to the public hearings, or related to the projects on our agenda this evening. So I'll move on with the agenda. First time is the minutes from the June 9th meeting, and they will be distributed at a future meeting.
Yeah, I just got those on Thursday, so they'll be edited next week.
All right, moving on to old business. The first item is a planned unit development for the Vance Farms PUD, and we should continue to table that.
Yep, at this point, I know the applicants did meet with engineering staff this past week to work out some of the issues regarding off-street improvements, payment, activity, all of that. So when that gets wrapped up, and I suspect that will be shortly, then we'll have enough information to move forward with the general plan on that development.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda is a public hearing set for 7 o'clock for an amended zoning map to establish a transitional mixed-use district within the city. Mr. Kaiser.
Okay, back in March, council did adopt the text to the transitional mixed-use zoning district. And so the next step in the process to actually create a mapped zone on the city zoning map. And again, the TMU district was designed to be applied around commercial centers, such as downtown, where uses are more likely to be fluid and transitional, where typical single family or single use zoning may not be appropriate. It would allow for two things. One, nearby commercial uses could expand into that district, vice versa. Existing residential uses in a district that's currently zoned commercial would become conforming. So I think when we started looking at this, we looked at three potential areas where this could apply. And starting with, I think, what is probably the first district, and that would be the area that is just north and east of downtown. And this shows it on the map. What you see in green consists of 35 properties. They're all currently zoned C1 commercial. I think the total land area is rough. I think that 8 acres is wrong. I had to adjust the boundaries. I think it's closer to 11 acres in total. So it's about 3 times the area of our downtown CDBD district. But I think TMU zoning for these properties have certain advantages over the current C1 zone that they're part of. First is that most of the current uses are residential. Under the C1 zoning, they're all non-conforming uses. If this were in a TMU district, they would become legal conforming uses. It makes them easier to buy, sell, and improve without the non-conforming use stigma attached to it. Number two, even though most of the current uses in this particular C1 zoning district are residential and therefore non-conforming, Most of the lots don't even meet the minimum requirements that are required by the C1 district. And if they don't meet the minimum lot standards, more likely than not, they're not going to meet any of the setback standards should they develop, as a typical C1 type use. In fact, most of the properties in the vicinity are around 8,000 square feet. There are a few churches that have land areas of up to about half an acre. But the minimum lot area in a C1 district is 20,000 square feet, and most of the properties don't come close to that. Number three is that the C1 district requires an extensive amount of off-street parking. The TMU is more pedestrian in scale, and it allows for and encourages smaller scale commercial uses, don't have a lot of extensive parking requirements, and that are really scaled for a more pedestrian type environment. And by pedestrian, I also mean residential scale as well. And again, most of the properties are used for residential uses, but they are mixed in and adjacent to some other types of office use. And this would be a good area for the downtown to expand into when we reach some capacity issues there. So again, I think that in order to really make the C1 district work in this area, I think it's going to have a real negative impact on the center city, because we'd have to have a lot of lot consolidations and replats to create lots under 20,000 square feet in area. Therefore, you lost all the pedestrian neighborhood feel. You're going to have larger parking requirements, larger setbacks, and it's just not something. I think the long-range impacts on the built environment around downtown are just significant and negative. So again, the TMU regulations were meant to kind of bridge this gap where, all right, it's not quite downtown, but the existing C1 zoning doesn't make sense. We need to create something different. So I think this is probably a good area to start. Creates a lot of flexibility. And again, it's more responsive, I think, to market demand. If there were a demand for a lot of commercial uses, these things could be converted over. Vice versa, if there's a demand for housing, this would allow housing as a permitted use as well, without all of the non-conforming issues that go along with that. So this is what I would recommend that we forward to council as the first TMU zoning district. I do want to bring up something. I did get an email late in the day from Mr. Sondels asking some questions that really are related to signage for this area. And that's the next step that we're going to have to take. As I mentioned, all of the properties that are in the boundaries of this TMU district are currently C1. And they have higher signage allocations than what the downtown district does. But it's not part of the downtown district per se. It's not part of the Wadsworth Main Street, their historic overlay district, I should say. And some properties like the Save-A-Lot, they're actually on the west side of High Street. They are still going to be zoned C1, and they would still follow those requirements. So I think what I started to do is look at the CDB, the table for the CDBG, the Central Business District signage. I think what we'll probably have to do is either modify that to include some provisions for TMU, or just create a new table that allows for TMU signage. It's going to be similar to downtown, but these properties have yard areas where most of the properties downtown don't. So I think there should be some type of provision for freestanding signs, because many of the businesses in the corridor, some of the homes that were either converted to retail or to office uses, there's an insurance office up there, they have freestanding signs. So I think we'll probably have to come up with a new signage table for the TMU district. But in the meantime, we're really looking to get the ball rolling before council, and I would recommend that you send this over to them with the recommendation for TME zoning for the 35 parcels. And I believe in your staff report, I'd attach the list of what those are by permanent parcel.
Any commissioners have any questions for Mr. Kaiser? Apparently not. I guess my only question I would have, would we get in a bind if we put this thing through and then we haven't got the sign code fixed?
Not really, because one, the sign code will be following shortly thereafter, and if it's not specified in the sign code and someone wants to do a business, well, there's no provision for your signage. So it's not going to take long to follow up with signage updates.
I'm good with that. All right, commissioners, anything else? All right. Yeah, at this point, I'd like to open the public hearing. If there's anyone in the audience who wants to address the planning commission regarding this topic. I believe there is, so I'll close the public hearing. We have a recommendation from staff to forward this to council for their consideration. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Planning Commission recommend to City Council the adoption of a transitional mixed-use zoning district, which in the first batch would include a 35 parcel section on the, to be included in the recommendation.
Second.
Heard the motion and the second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving on, the next item is a public hearing set for 6:10 for conditional zoning certificate for electronic message board sign for Wadsworth Motors, 754 Broad Street. Mr. Kaiser.
Okay, Wadsworth Motor Cars is updating their existing freestanding sign. And the new sign would incorporate an electronic message center board. And those types of signs are conditionally permitted in commercial and industrial districts. And the reason they are is that when the sign code was overhauled back in 2008, EMCs were just kind of gaining a foothold. They were fairly new. As a result, the ones were rather large in size. And the only local example we had was the billboard sign out on I-76 in Norton. And so at the time, that's something the city didn't really want to have within our boundaries, and the sign regulations were kind of tailored to prohibit that type of thing. They were made intentionally small, and the changeable copy signs were made a conditional use so that there would be some planning commission input. But there have been technological changes over the intervening 10, 15 years that have made the EMCs much smaller, more affordable, and therefore they're more accessible by smaller businesses. And I think they're certainly easier to maintain and update than the manual message boards, which many times remain vacant or with falling letters. So the long and short is that I think in the future, the sign regulations might be in need of being looked at again and making some changes to EMCs and how they're addressed. But in the meantime, this applicant is bound by the current regulations, and that does require conditional zoning review. In terms of the general standards, I'm not going to go through those because I think the EMC project meets those. It's an automobile dealership. It's located in the C3 commercial district, so it's really where it needs to be. And the use itself is not at issue here. So I'll just move on to some of the specific standards that apply to EMC signs. The first is that the sign needs to be located on a arterial thoroughfare and that's what Broad Street is. So it meets that requirement. Here's an aerial of the existing sign and the existing look of Broad Street. The other requirement is that lots where they're going to display an EMC sign have to have a minimum frontage of 200 feet and a minimum lot area of 40,000 square feet, which is about an acre. This lot really only has 93 feet of frontage, and its area is 20,550 square feet. So it doesn't even meet current C3 district requirements. The BZA did grant variances to these requirements on June 16th, which allows this case to move forward. But again, those provisions were designed with the large EMCs in mind and to prevent an oversized sign from being on a small property. There's also a requirement that says these signs have to be set back at least 15 feet from the front property line. That is the current zoning standard for all new signage in commercial districts. In this case, the applicants were proposing to reuse the existing sign because, again, we have a small lot, most of it's parking. Moving the sign back another 10 feet or so would put it like right in the middle of the parking lot. And you can't really tell from this picture, but you can see that there are other freestanding signs in the corridor that are very close to the front property line. So again, the BZA did grant a variance that would allow the new EMC to be installed on the current sign in its current location. There's also a requirement that says the sign can't be closer than 200 feet to a 1, 2, or 3 family dwelling or any other electronic or mechanical changeable copy sign as measured perpendicular to the face of the sign. So that's just going up 300 feet in either direction on the north side of the Broad Street corridor. And all of the uses within that 300 feet are zoned and used for commercial purposes, so we don't have an issue there. The last two conditions can only be met once the sign's up and running, and that is that messages can't change more than 4 times per minute, so we have to have a static display for 15 seconds. I think current standards recommend even 8 to 10 seconds is appropriate. That's something we'll look at too. But they've indicated they're willing to comply with the current standard. And then also full motion video is prohibited. That's always been in the code. We don't want a lot of scrolling or moving parts. Display your message for a set time so people can read it and then move on to the next. So with the variances, they've met the first 4 of the 6 conditions. The other 2 can only be determined once they're up and operating. I see no issues with the proposal and would recommend the commission approve the conditional zoning certificate for this EMC sign, provided that the applicant gives us a written statement to the planning department indicating their intent to comply with sections 154, 546B, paragraph 39, E and F. And those are the two items we talked about the length of display and the full motion video. So other than that, the ADC's already looked at the sign and approved the design. What the new sign would look like is the one you see on the left. On the right shows the current layout. We've got a 35-foot panel with a 20 square foot changeable reader board. It would all be incorporated into an electronic header and then the changeable copy board of about 32 square feet. Pretty much same height. Because it's all going to be incorporated into one box, it actually sits up a little bit higher, but overall both signs are about 19 foot 10 inches. So that's all I have if there's any questions, but I think the request is appropriate and it's time to look at some of our sign regulations as they pertain to
Commissioners have
these
any
types of
questions for
signs.
Mr. Kaiser?
I have one.
Yes.
Mr. Kaiser, in terms of overnight usage of the sign, if it's approved, would just the header be illuminated overnight, or would the business have the opportunity to have scrolling or rolling electronic materials in the lower banner portion of the sign?
That's a good point, because I think all of these things are set on a computer, so it could be, theoretically, yes, they could use it to continue to scroll messages during the evening hours or off hours. I think that's something that we could ask the applicants about, and even as a condition of approval, add that as a prohibition. I think this issue came up with the fire department sign.
It did.
Okay, and so during off hours, it was just going to, it's all EMC, and it was just going to display the fire department logo. So I think we should hear from the applicant, but I think that's a good point, is that should be no continuous display during non-business hours.
The basis of my question to Mr. Kaiser for my fellow commissioners is that, as you know from this particular location, while there are adjoining commercial properties to this particular site, directly across the street, there is residential use there on Broad Street. So while there may not be interruptions based upon the electronic message board to fellow commercial establishments, I think across the street you might have the potential for residential impacts.
All right, anything else, Commissioners?
You have a chance.
Hang on. At this time, if the applicant would like to speak briefly before I open the public hearing.
So Debbie with Elliott Sign, representing Wadsworth Motor Cars. Dave couldn't be here today because he's in Tennessee, but he was able to meet all the other meetings he attended with architectural review and the BZA. As far as with the question in regards to the settings, all of that is through the software. We could, at nighttime, it automatically sets a control so that there's no glare. As far as with the content display, they know that there's no moving objects, there's going to be a distraction to drivers driving down on the main road there. As far as with the residential property across the street, I mean, that's something we don't see to be a distraction, but if you feel that that is something that should be addressed, in settings, we could turn it off at a certain time that's designated. If that's a requirement that you have, we could definitely meet that. Everything is just really all enabled through the software settings where it's controlled at. So it makes it very much, ease of use, ease of manageability, especially when adhering to the environment that's surrounding it.
So do you think the operator would have any problem to a condition that says no messages shall be displayed during non-business hours? I mean, the other thing, the Wadsworth motor car heading could still.
I mean, it's not something, if they don't feel like it's a distraction, then, we would like to be able to use it. But if you feel like, we wouldn't know, obviously, until the sign's up and running, if you happen to get a complaint from the resident. The way it's facing right now, we don't see it to be any more of a lighting distraction versus what's already up there in the surrounding area.
Maybe something like
Well, here's
10 to 6 in the morning or something like that.
Yeah. What are the business hours? Do you know?
I'm not exactly sure. I would assume they're probably going all the way up until 8 or 9 o'clock, no
Then
later.
I think maybe that would be appropriate, and to no messages being displayed between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. And if the applicant
That would seem reasonable.
If the applicant has an issue with that, they can always appeal that decision to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Yeah.
But I think it's a reasonable,
Yeah.
a reasonable solution so that overnight, if they want to keep their Wadsworth motor car header on all night, okay. Because I know the software will dim the lights so they're not as bright as it would be when it's competing, with sunlight in the day.
Right,
But-
we're 38 kelvins to 5,000 kelvins on the top header panel. We always have the adaptability of putting dimmer controls if needed, but those are pretty standard, industry standard that you happen to see.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
I think that's all we have at this point. All right, at this time, I would like to open the public hearing. Since there's no one else in the audience here for that, I will close the public hearing. Mr. Kaiser, you have some words to...
Yeah, I would just
accommodate that?
recommend approval, subject to getting a written statement indicating their intent to comply with the two subparagraphs we talked about earlier, 154, 546B, 39E and F, and that no messages shall be displayed between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m.
Is that acceptable? As you know?
We were kind of anticipating that would happen because of the fact that we had a residential property across the street.
So the Wadsworth part
Even
stays,
though we don't feel like it's going to be a distraction,
but the Wadsworth part stays on, but the cars and the prices go away.
Yes, the top header
Yeah.
of the header will stay on.
All right,
But in setting controls, we will just turn it off.
Okay.
Unless you would allow weather to still be able to appear.
you could real... you
I
could-
think as proposed is probably the best way to go
Yeah, I
about it.
think, yeah. And if that becomes an issue, you can appeal the decision of the planning commission to the zoning board of appeals. Okay, are we ready for a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the planning commission approve the conditional zoning permit for a new sign for the Wadsworth Motor Car Company at 754 Broad Street, subject to the applicant providing a written statement to the planning department indicating the intent to comply with Section 154, 546B, 39E and F, as well as a statement to the effect that the sign, other than the header, will be turned off or down between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m.
Second?
You've heard the motion and the second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye, those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you for coming. The next item on our agenda is a public hearing set for 6:20 for a conditional zoning certificate for Children's Daycare Center, Goddard Schools at 284 Park Center Drive in the C3 Commercial District. Mr. Kaiser.
Okay. This application is for a daycare center at 284 Park Center Drive. That's at the intersection of Laverne and Park Center Drive. It is directly south and adjacent to a site on Laverne Drive that was approved in 2024 for a daycare site. Daycare uses are conditionally permitted, and we'll go through the conditional requirements here in a bit. Some of the key provisions of this project are as follows. We've got about a 10,800 square foot building. Come on here. Got about 10,800 square foot building. Looks like we have about 10 classrooms, a gym and resource room. There's staff offices, conference room, a small kitchen or kitchenette, pantry, restroom facilities, off-street parking with about 62 spaces, and those are located in front of the building and on the west side. and one point of access to Park Center Drive. Stormwater management will be an above-ground basin located in the front yard along Laverne. And one thing I didn't mention is that there are 2 outdoor play areas on either side of the building, and they comply with the 60-foot setback to that particular line. The building itself is further back. But again, two playground areas on either side of the building, and you'll see that a little better in the architectural elevations. One thing I noted is that the project is concentrated on the east portion of this particular site. And on plan page C102, there is a note that talks about this line for a future lot split. I want to make sure I've got the right page up here.
I think you had it.
Yeah, I did too. It's right here. It's just that it doesn't show up as well as I would want it to on the board.
I think 102A would show the actual split a little bit more.
Yeah, okay. Here we go.
Yep.
So you can see that what they've done is shown, hey, in the future, this is where a possible property line could go. And they've kind of, with a light line, showed a potential second development on the site. And we'll talk about that and its impacts here a little bit later. Again, once more in terms of the general standards review, the conditions from 154-544B, I think they appear to be in compliance with all the intent of these standards. Some issues that deal with building code compliance, et cetera, won't be able to be addressed until the project's constructed and operational, but I think we don't have any issues there. So we'll move on with the specific standards review. Those are 154-546B. The first condition, this applies to all conditional uses, and it talks about things such as loudspeakers, site lighting, parking, conditional uses complying with district requirements, etc. I would just note that in terms of loudspeakers, none have been proposed. Site lighting, if there is any, it would be in the parking lot. I'm not sure about the play areas, but a photometric plan is required as part of our civil plan review. So they'll have to show that they do comply with the glare standard. Parking and loading, they exceed the minimum parking requirements. The structure itself complies with all of the C3 district requirements. It is a corner lot, so we have 2 front yards on both Laverne and Park Center. The rear property line is going to be the west property line, and the side lot line is the one on the north. And that's where they have most of their space. So they've met all of the those requirements. And again, one general comment is that no conditional use will be permitted, which isn't compatible with adjacent uses. I think we're compatible. Most of the uses are commercial, and right next door is another daycare center. So moving on with the specific conditions. Paragraph 3 from this section states that all activity areas should be at least 100 feet from all property lines. I would just point out again that all of the structure complies with the C3 district requirements. There are very, very few, if any, sites in the city that could maintain 100 feet setback from property lines to any activity area, let alone a building. So obviously you see that the playground areas are going to be located in fences pretty much up to the side and potential rear well, near the rear of the property. So that condition, I don't think it's all that important, especially in this type of use, in this type of district. Paragraph 4 talks about the location of vehicular access points to the site, and they do have one proposed curb cut that's about 280 feet from the intersection of Park Center and Laverne. So they are in compliance with that, although in a little bit we'll talk about this curb cut may have to be moved slightly in one direction or another. Paragraph 7, these developments should be located adjacent to non-residential uses. Well, pretty much everything's non-residential, so we have no issues there. Number 10, the extension of all utility services should be at the developer's expense. All the utilities are in place, so the applicant will be responsible for just tying in, putting in the laterals to this site. And then paragraph 30 talks about conditions that are more geared to the daycare type uses. And first says that this is prohibited in a C4 district, so that's not applicable. Outside play areas need to be enclosed by a fence with a minimum height of 4 feet. That has been done. Just kind of give you, here's kind of the, looking from the north and west type of elevation. So the perimeter of the building would be fenced. The applicant indicates that it will be a minimum of 4 feet, but I think we should ask about that. It looks like it might be higher at 6 feet. We'll address that with the applicant. There is also a section that talks about, let me see if I've got everything. Yes. Talks about there needs to be a designated parental drop-off pickup location. Well, there's one main central door at the south entrance or south elevation of the building, but it looks like children are actually brought into the facility by their parents or guardians. There's really no drop-off anymore. And I think that's kind of noted with the parking for this site. Based on the city's parking requirements, they would need, what did I come up with? Well, at any given time, they would probably not require more than 32 parking spaces. They're providing 64. So they've got enough parking for their employees and for parents and guardians to come into the site, park the car, walk their kids into the building, and do the same at night. So I don't see an issue here. I think they've met that requirement. And back from when this provision was written many years ago, the whole model has changed, for safety. And the children are being walked into the site under supervision. So again, we don't have a strict figure on how many employees are anticipated, so we may want to talk to the applicant about that. And then finally, in Ohio, all daycare centers providing for care of 7 or more children must be licensed by the state. I believe that licensure doesn't occur until after final occupancy. So I think as part of the project closeout that we'd get a copy of that particular license. The provisions there in B don't apply. Those are only in case the facility is located in a residential district, so we don't need to worry about that. In terms of other review agency comments, nothing received from fire or safety. I take that back. I did get an email from the fire chief late in the day, said I've got no issues with this. The only real issue that I think came up was from our critical issue is from our electric department. And that's, you can see this on plan page C103. Where the driveway is proposed, or the curb cut is proposed, it goes over top of electric lines and pole boxes operated by the our electric division. And although the applicants proposed to replace the boxes with traffic-bearing boxes in the same location, that solution was not found to be acceptable by the electric department. So they've suggested that the curb cut location be relocated a little bit further to the west or east to clear these boxes. And talk a little bit more about that later. Engineering department also recommended conditional approval. They also noted if the property is to be split, not only would we have to come back to Planning Commission for a plat and future site approval, but we would want some cross-parking and cross-access easements to be placed on the lot at the time of split, so that even if the development to the west gets its own curb cut, both uses should have access to those curb cuts, and the parking lots should be interconnected. So it looks like possibly here to the north and here to the south on the proposed parking lot, that might have to be modified slightly. They've got well more than enough spaces, so losing 4 or 5 is not going to have any impact. Again, engineering comments were typical. OEPA approval and stormwater pollution prevention plans need to be reviewed and approved by OEPA. Sidewalk will be required along both street frontages. For fire safety, it's that'll be looked at in a little more detail, but all parts of the building have to be within 300 feet of a fire hydrant as the hose lines. So there is a possibility that a 8-inch water line and hydrant may have to be extended onto the property. I believe that was the case with the Goddard School. I don't know if that's going to be required here. That'll be looked at as part of the civil plans for the site. Stormwater management meets both quality and quantity standards, and they'll need easements for access and maintenance, and as-built drawings and stormwater calcs upon project completion. And finally, the Architectural Design Committee did look at the project tonight. They did approve the building elevations, the design features and colors, as well as landscaping, which you also see on this particular plan page. The future, they'll be back with freestanding signage and wall-mounted. So just a few other additional site issues I wanted to bring up. As I mentioned last meeting, traffic impacts, they are below the threshold for requiring a traffic impact study. However, that doesn't absolve them from paying any impact fees that would be required by the project. And during civil plan review, engineering did say that additional minor studies might be required to document the need for any dedicated turn lane or to show traffic movements into and out of the site. But again, nothing requiring any type of full-blown traffic study. The future lot split we've already talked about. That would have to be approved by the Planning Commission, and again, just making it known that some certain cross-parking and cross-access easements may be required in order to interconnect these two sites. The curb cut location, relocation, I should say, as per the electric department's comments, that driveway will have to be moved slightly. I don't think this should hold up the Planning Commission's action on this proposal tonight. But as a condition of approval, I would recommend that signing the plans and conditional zoning certificate as approved shouldn't be done until we've got a revised plan that shows where that new curb cut is, and that location has been basically okayed by our engineering department. Another issue that I just want to prevent it from becoming an issue is, as you saw from the elevations, the play areas are going to be enclosed within a fence. Running along the north property line, there are areas that are marked out for various storm and sanitary easements. Sanitary easement's going to be required because this western part of the parcel, that's where they're going to have to get access from. So where the fencing comes involved is typically we don't like to have fences within easements. So if those easements are going to be public, we'd have to get an agreement with our engineering department to make sure that they're okay with the fence location, its posts, it's not going to interfere with any lines. If the easements are private, well, there won't be a public agreement necessary, but it's just an issue that I think needs to be brought up so that it can be addressed during the civil site plan review. And finally, fire hydrant spacing, we talked a little bit about that. I'm not sure if that is an issue, but it will be looked at in more detail as part of the civil plan review. So with that in mind, again, I don't see anyone here in the meeting room to discuss this. If there really aren't any issues, I would recommend approval of the project, the conditional zoning certificate with the 7 conditions as noted in the staff report. And I think the big one really for the commission is number 1, that we would want to see a modified site plan with the new curb access that's been okayed by the city engineer before we sign off on the conditional zoning certificate. So that's all I have. If there's any questions before turning it over to the applicant.
Any questions for Mr. Kaiser? All right, if the applicant would like to make a comment or two before I open the public hearing.
Hi, good evening. Justin Fye with Avid Architects, formerly MPG Architects. Thank you, Mr. Kaiser, for the thorough presentation. Always appreciated. I can just address a couple of the comments or questions that were brought up in the report and in the presentation. You know, the photometric plan that's noted on here, that is currently being worked on, and we will certainly comply with the full cutoff fixtures at the property lines to meet the glare standards. So no concerns there with meeting the requirements. As far as the curb cut and access drive is concerned, we've spoken with the land developers and owners. No concerns with moving that drive. The intent's going to be to move the access drive to the east to avoid the utility boxes and electrical infrastructure that's in place there today. So we will, of course, present or provide a revised site plan indicating compliance with that and still maintaining the 100-foot minimum required from the intersection. We'll be plenty far away from that. As far as the outdoor play areas are concerned, as the staff report indicates, yes, the fence is proposed, the perimeter fence at 6 foot high, and then the intervening dividing fences between the play areas is 4 foot high. So the perimeter of it is at 6 foot currently as designed. As far as site drop-off is concerned, again, yes, we have the same conclusion as the staff report. The children are brought into the facility, parents park, and escort the children into the building. And we do feel that adequate parking is on the site to accommodate that. The staff members right now in our preliminary compliance plan, we have allocated for 20 employees. So we're definitely in compliance, or feel we're in compliance with the required number of parking spaces. Not sure, I think I might have hit all of them, but certainly if there are any other questions, happy to answer them.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned a consideration of moving the curb cut further to the east, if you will. That would bring it closer to the intersection with Laverne Drive. Have you considered moving it further to the west, since we're going to probably require that cross-access easement between the two parcels if it was ever to be split? That would seem to allow you to have access to both parcels if it was moved further west, perhaps along a future property line or something of that nature? Have you considered that at all?
We did consider that option. It was the owner's desire to move it to the east, understanding that if the parcel to the west is subdivided, that will of course have its own entry drive, and cross traffic between the two will be provided. So yeah, we'd like to get that drive more aligned with the front entry of the building, so that on approach it really comes in and has ease of drop-off or escorting in for the parents as they're coming into the site.
Fair enough. Mr. Kaiser, what is the setback requirement from that intersection?
That clearance, it's going to be at least a minimum of 100 feet. Right now, it's at 280. This would probably put it close to like 175.
So if it becomes 250, it's not an issue.
What I would suggest is, as you modify the plan, I would start with this one here, the utility plan, and put that location on, send it to me, and then I'll distribute it to engineering and service and safety for feedback.
Understood.
And like I said, the only other thing that you may want to take a look at, well, let's just do that and leave it at that, but assuming your traffic numbers aren't going to change, you know, by moving it 80 feet closer to that intersection, do you anticipate any traffic backups? I would assume most people would turn to the west to go out to the signalized intersection at Park Center, but there may be some going northbound that would loop around over. Just be prepared to kind of address, is this going to change any of our traffic patterns?
Sure. Okay.
One question, are you familiar with the conditions of approval in the staff report? Are they acceptable?
Yes, and they are acceptable.
Okay, very good.
May I ask, how many students are you anticipating at full capacity?
I should know that number. Is that what it was? 162.
And how about end times? Are they staggered, or does everybody leave at the same time?
You want to?
I would add to that, what's your hours of operation?
Hi, my name is Mike Thompson. I'm one of the owners of the Goddard School and operate multiple sites. So the times will be 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then with this type of school, the schedule's all over the place. I have students that are, Monday and Wednesday. I have students that are 5 full days. I have students that are half day. We're open 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. and they pay for that time. It doesn't mean that they are there for that time. It really does spread it out naturally. No bells, no buses. People come and go as they want. We do recommend they're there before 9, but it doesn't mean that actually happens. Our half day pickup is before 1 p.m. because they nap from 1 to 3. So if there are any pickup times that would have higher traffic per se, it's the 12:30 and it's the 3 p.m. and then I have parents who pick up at 6:05 and I got to charge them for being late. So it naturally kind of spreads itself out.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, at this time, I would like to open the public hearing, and I believe there's no one in the audience other than the applicants, so I will close the public hearing. We have a recommendation for approval from staff. Is there any other questions for staff? If not, We're ready for a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would make a recommendation that the commission approve the conditional zoning certificate and site plan for the Goddard School at 284 Park Center Drive, subject to the 7 conditions that are listed in the staff report.
Second.
You've heard the motion and the second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you all for coming. Mr. Kaiser, any new business? It says none.
No, just letting you know, next meeting will be July 14th. I think we've got a couple small cases, including a few zoning amendments. There's a few small changes we're going to make. Might even put in the TMU signage as part of those.
Good. Commissioners, have anything to bring up?
No.
Your motion to adjourn?
So move.
We are adjourned.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.